This is a webinar on the community development and community well-being, finding points of intersection and building for the future. So we've invited several speakers. We actually have a moderator as well with us from the Happiness Alliance. Her name is Laura Muzikansky. So I'll turn it over to her to introduce our speakers today. Laura?
All right, thank you, Jill. And I'm very honored to be able to present these next speakers. Jill Johnson, who is the Executive Director of ISQOLS, has also been involved in this project. And we have Rhonda Phillips, who you all know is the past president of ISQOLS and the Dean of the Honors College at Purdue University. Whose bio we could just spend the whole webinar on the amazing things that you've done, Rhonda. So really honored to have you. Thank you. Craig has been teaching at Arizona State University on community resilience, and is also a professor at Hobart and William Smith colleges, and is really looking at some really interesting intercepts between entrepreneurship, resilience, community engagement, and different aspects of volunteerism and spirituality as well. And Kai is doing really cutting edge work in the area of academics, and then working in the involvement with the community to develop what does happiness and well-being mean, and how do we measure it coming from the community. So this is a really beautiful combination of interests and experience I'm really excited to hear this webinar myself. So thank you all of you, all four of you, and I think we have a guest speaker as well who has some experience as a student working on this that we'll hear from at the end. So thank you again, and now we'll turn it over to our first speaker.
So this came about as a new initiative from the Community Development Society, and so there were already good relationships between the International Society of Quality of Life Studies and Community Development Society because of different members were a part of it. But the overflow or the overlap of members between societies hasn't traditionally been large. And so Rhonda Phillips reached out to me as I was part of the Community Development Society leadership, and we said, why don't we look at applying for an innovative community engagement grant from Community Development Society and explore opportunities for overlaps between Community Development Society and their work and the International Society of Quality of Life Studies and their work. And so they're hosted through the Community Innovation Lab, this community engagement grant that is provided by the Community Development Society and led by Dan Collin and Dr. Dan Collin and Dr. Christina Haynes, has been coordinating a cohort of CDS fellows, and these fellows meet monthly to discuss how they're working on their projects, giving support, and what we were looking at, and you can see some of the themes there, is how do we increase engagement in community development and also community development research and practice. And so we have different themes of young professionals and graduate students, international community development work, urban community development work, and then our work is in international quality of life work. And so we are really excited to look at the ways to increase the partnerships and overlaps between our societies and work together. So if you look at our description, what you can find is there were places to build capacity and for intersection. And so some of the things that we're exploring and is a sort of a shared membership or joint membership, so you get discounts if you join both societies. But other aspects is we're doing some student exchanges where we're sending students to Hong Kong to the ISQOLS conference and a student to Detroit for the CDS conference. And so figuring out ways that we can engage and develop our separate societies, but develop them together. And so really working on looking at from the student level to the scholar level, and really assessing how are the best ways for us to do that, because we have natural overlaps in the idea or the topic of community well-being. And right before the webinar started, we had a nice little conversation about the difference between quality of life and well-being, and we can bring that up again. But that community well-being is of great interest to community development, and it's also of interest to ISQOLS. And so it provides a cool way for us to sort of put together our overlap, since we all have a common mission in that regard.
Thank you, Craig. And Rhonda, would you take a moment to explain both organizations, since you have an involvement with both of them?
Sure, absolutely. ISQOLS, or International Society for Quality of Life Studies, has been around since the early 90s. And this was an outgrowth of looking at sort of the changing way that we approach development and also well-being. And so this group is very interdisciplinary. They are range from economists to philosophers to health and medical professionals. And it brings together this diverse group to really look at what is quality of life. I mean, how are we defining it from either, a very business, economic standpoint, or more from a well-being, medical standpoint, or from a community standpoint that's more of a development type perspective, such as people like myself and some of you on the call today. I looked quickly and saw several names I recognize. So this group, anyway, is predominantly international. We meet in the U.S. only about every 8 or 9 years, but we have a journal that we publish that's well regarded and has pretty high impact factor. The contributors range all over many different disciplines, all sort of with the common idea of looking at quality of life from whichever lens they may be studying or researching in. And that's what makes it so interesting, is that it's so diverse. And so one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again for ISQOLS is this idea of the collective well-being, or what we on the community development side of things like to say community well-being and community development. And so what we began to notice was there was a lot of interest in some of the same things that people on the community development side were doing. CDS, or Community Development Society, has been around since 1970, and it was formed as an outgrowth of the need for local and regional areas to take more control of development for their areas. CDS is a very interdisciplinary group as well. They have the common focus around, as you would guess, development. So we have practitioners, we have researchers, we have students who are members of this group, and they again range from rural sociologists, economists, to people working in social services, on and on. And so they tend to focus on making things better through positive, very sort of progressive development in their town, city regions. And so we can begin to see that interface really quickly, because over on the ISQOLS side, people were talking about how do we make things better at the collective level, whether that's community, regional, national, state, whatever it may be. We have community development scholars and practitioners who really know the processes and the outcomes of community development, but there wasn't a lot of overlap. And so this is why we're trying to bring more connection between those two groups so that we can push forward for better well-being and better community development outcomes across the whole spectrum. So that's sort of where we are now. I encourage you, if you are not members of both, to look at that special offer, which is to be able to join both societies. And so next person, I think, let's see, Jill, is that you that's going to explain this?
Sure. Well, typically what we see nonprofits is we tend to work in silos, even though our missions do overlap quite a bit. And so this is a great opportunity for us to see how we can cross-pollinate, is what we say, and to further both of our missions, which really do have very similar tones and themes. Craig, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Sure. No, the only thing I would add is if you look at sort of the descriptions and the principles of both organizations, and CDS has its principles of good practice, you can see that all of them are about, you can see overlaps in meaning, you can see overlaps in interdisciplinarity and sort of enhancing leadership and moving us towards a better place, a higher well-being. And so this is what we're trying to develop. And I think we're hoping that the ISQOLS CDS model can be a model for other organizations, for other sort of better together partnerships that we can see in collaborations, and that this isn't just a standalone thing. Hopefully we can be representative of a cool model for other folks and other voluntary associations.
Just speak to this slide. I think Rhonda did a great job of explaining what of our overall purpose, but we do really want to develop closer liaisons across all disciplines. We pride ourselves in ISQOLS of being very interdisciplinary. As Rhonda explained, we have economists, we have psychologists, we have researchers, faculty, practitioners from all over the world, that really contribute to this particular field. We are looking for opportunities and ways to engage sort of the next generation upcoming researchers, young students. And we'll speak about that. We do have one of those students with us today, Chelsea, who I think Jonathan's also on board with us as well today. So they'll explain their role and involvement with this project as well.
Absolutely. So again, you see these principles of good practice that come from the CDS website that have been adopted by the society. And, there are a lot of different ways to meaningfully influence decisions, a lot of ways to promote positive impacts. But the thing is, Community Development Society, while it does have some work in community well-being, has a lot to learn from ISQOLS, has a lot to learn from the journals, and has a lot to learn in sort of how do we actually promote this sustainability and well-being. And so being able to form these partnerships to say, like, how do we enhance leadership? Well, one of the ways is through knowledge. And so let's figure out ways that we can partner together in order to move towards these goals. And so Community Development Society is full of both researchers and practitioners, which is really exciting. And so there are those who may work in extension offices across the United States, where they may be serving a lot of the rural communities, but others are working in urban communities as well. We have, as you saw with the CDS Fellows group, there are folks that are young adults, there are folks that are older adults, and that are all engaged in figuring out ways to make our communities that we live in both. CDS mostly works with in-person communities of place, but there are those who are doing good work in sort of virtual communities and other communities as well.
So what we really want to think about is ways to collaborate. And I just wanted to stop for a moment and just put this out here, because I can't wait for the discussion portion so we can hear back from all of you who are participating. This idea of a new framework for community well-being, and I would also say community development. I mean, we've had the sort of the practice and the discipline of community development around since the 70s. It was actually being practiced before then. It's just that it sort of came together as a discipline about that time. And we've had community well-being arise in the relatively not so distant future, maybe over the last couple of decades. We've been seeing more and more work around this idea. The next reiteration of community development in some ways, that we're moving beyond the focus on the more physical or social dimensions, process dimensions, to looking at the holistic well-being of the community. And this is, what community well-being is all about. Now, there's some overlap, obviously, with development. There's some other areas that don't quite overlap quite as much with when it's focusing on communities of interest, and those tend to be, at least in our literature and in the journal articles, around, say, like mental health communities or communities that are doing very specialized type of activities. And so we in community well-being are trying to broaden that out a bit more so that it can be also very relevant for communities of place and not only for communities of interest. So I encourage you all to explore this idea and to see if there could be even more connection between what we know from the development side of the equation with what we're still very much learning and is sort of being rolled out as we speak, the ideas around the collective well-being or community well-being. So that's sort of a long introduction. I think we could probably go to the next slide now. And basically, when we think about this idea of what collaboration means, we could connect the ISQOLS community of community well-being indicators. We use a lot of metrics and evaluation in the scholarship of quality of life and well-being. We do everything from sort of national level down to regional, neighborhood level in terms of indicators. And I think there's a lot there that could really help inform and help broaden some of the constructs around community development. Some of us in community development also use it in a way that informs our practice would be really potentially very valuable. CDS or community development also, is able to have knowledge of community development typologies, like what approaches work best, what don't, what new emerging tools, techniques, and methods work best. And so this is something that we see as bringing it together. We get improved community development models and metrics. And I would also add improved understanding of what community well-being is. Okay, so examples of collaboration. Having representation is important because there are times when I've been at either meeting and have heard others speak about things that the other organization is doing and that research area, but not aware of the other. And so I think we've got to make a deliberate, intentional effort to have at least one joint session every year in our conferences, to be able to say, this is a session we're doing together that we're going to be able to explore that intersection. I mean, that's pretty critical. We're making a start on it this year with presenting the results of our study at both conferences. And it's not a formally designated ISQOLS/CDS session, but it's the start to getting that to happen, which I feel like we can do definitely for ISQOLS by next year. We can have that. Hopefully the CDS side will as well. We have incentives to join both organizations. We can get both journals, both community development and also applied research and quality of life studies. So both of those journals are offered as part of membership, and they're both really well informed in their respective areas. So I think that would be something to do that could help. And so looking for other incentives, maybe with students, those newer scholars we could bring in and have some way to encourage them to be part of what we're doing. And then the community indicator research workshops, encourage our members to take the training that ISQOLS offers in workshops and certification, and also to encourage our ISQOL members to take advantage of training that's offered by CDS. So let's see, Craig, did you want to jump in or you want me to continue this one?
I think you're doing great.
Okay.
Exactly. And you know, and CDS is as well exploring the opportunities of having perhaps an ISQOLS designated track, or in which ISQOLS has already been moving towards on there, and with community well-being tracks. And so I think these are good models too for us to pursue in different organizations.
Absolutely. And, you know, just sharing of information. I mean, we've talked about the journals, but also just being able to know what's happening in our respective fields and of research and practice. And that could be one thing that could really help as well. Networking, that goes without saying. I mean, you know, meeting face-to-face with people and talking directly, sometimes you get things that we can't get in other ways. And that will help forge those relationships even more. And then one other thing I'll just mention quickly, both societies have a couple of book series. So what I'd like to see happen is perhaps we bring in members together to do edited volumes, for example, with a member from ISQOLS, a member from CDS, in both the series. The series in ISQOLS is Community Wellbeing, Quality of Life, and the series in CDS is Community Development, Research and Practice. So we could easily have joint type volumes in both of those series and help expand the literature, help expand the knowledge of what we know and what we can push forward.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to actually invite Kai Ludwigs, who is with us, to explain a little bit about his organization and his project and how that corresponds with this project as well. Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Laura, I think already introduced me in the beginning. So I'm the founder and director of the Happiness Research Organization, which is an independent research institute based in Germany that does app-based research with a special focus on topics like quality of life, well-being, happiness. And I think the best way to start is to just show a video, which I think should show just how this could really look like in practice, how happiness research, well-being research can really inform community development and vice versa. And so yeah, I think we should just start to watch a short video of a project we did in Wuppertal, which is like a 300,000 people city in Western Germany. And I will explain a bit more about how that project is going after we watch the video. It's one project that actually really kicked off because we tried at a couple places to try to get mayors and politicians to get involved into the topic of understanding that it's not just about economic indicators, that it's more about really understanding quality of life, understanding the impact of happiness indicators, well-being indicators on people's life. And so in that sense, we were happy that the politicians as well as a local bank and were able to fund the projects in Wuppertal, which started all the discussions about 2 years ago. A year ago, we started this one, and it's still running quite smoothly, so with a couple thousand participants now in the study. And so it starts to be really like in an online dashboard, something to inform citizens as well as politicians to try to see what they can do in a community development aspect to try to develop the city further and develop it, as I said before, not just economically, so to adapt it really in the focus of quality of life indicators. And so, yeah, so this is continuing still quite well, and we are just trying to attract more and more people to get an even more representative data set. But of course, it's hard to get like ideally all these 200,000 or 300,000 inhabitants involved in this. But for now, we are just happy that we got started on a good data set.
Information about how happy we are and how to improve quality of life in Wuppertal are rarely available. Because of this, it is difficult to decide how to improve quality of life in Wuppertal. Happy Wuppertal is an app that helps to solve this challenge. After downloading the app from the App Store, you will answer a questionnaire about your subjective well-being and your community well-being. If you are one of the first 1,000 participants, you will be rewarded with €5 donation budget that you can use to fund a nonprofit project in Wuppertal. Every 3 months, the app reminds you to do the questionnaire again to win more donation budget. Additionally, you can always give feedback on how quality of life can be improved in Wuppertal. Either you write a note in the app, or you take a picture. Your information and that of all others will be analyzed anonymously. Every 6 months, the results will be published online. Additionally, all results will be presented and discussed at a public event to decide the next steps for a better life in Wuppertal. If you want to help to improve quality of life here in Wuppertal, you should participate. Happy Wuppertal. Happy in Wuppertal. Happy in life.
Yeah, so I hope that gives a clearer picture about what I was just explaining before. So it's in the end it's an app so that people can download. So you can also go on a website and give feedback. So it's every 3 months that there's a questionnaire about people's subjective well-being as well as their community well-being. And based on this, it's this information is then displayed in an online dashboard, as you saw in the video. And based on this, it's that people can just know how things are going in the city, and it starts to be a discussion point for the politicians, especially the mayor in Wuppertal. Like just really starts to use it. So he was at this public event that was also displayed in the video, where there was one in November, and there will be another one now in end of June. And so based on this, like the discussion continues further, and as I said, every 3 months we are pushing a new survey over the app, and people are just responding, and continuously they are able to just post a picture or send a message what they would think would be better in the city, or if they see something that's already really good and they want people to know about it. And so in this sense, like you increase citizen participation, as well as you're just getting a better data set about knowing what matters to the citizens, and so how to hopefully increase their well-being by community development interventions. So that's just should be a practical example of like how these cooperations in our point of view could look like.
Excellent. Thank you, Kai. I know that we have a few of our students that are involved in this project. I just want to give them an opportunity to speak. Chelsea, if you would mind just hopping on and talking about your involvement with this project.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chelsea Maupin. I just graduated from Purdue University. My degree was Sustainable Food and Farming Systems with an International Studies minor. And through a series of events, I met Dean Phillips, Rhonda, and was interested in learning more about urban planning and what her work is like, because I'm interested in having metrics of sustainability which are more towards happy and well-being rather than just constant economic growth. So through my degree, I've had a mix of horticulture courses and very practical agriculture courses, and also just discussions about sustainability. I went to University of Sussex for a study abroad, and that's in Brighton, England. They're one of the best for international development, so I'd like to do a career in international agriculture development. So I'm always interested in agriculture, cultures, and community, how those all overlap. So through being involved with the Community Innovation Lab, so I've been able to be in those webinars. I did a blog post once for the group and have enjoyed discussions there. I did my scholarly project with a gardening group in Lafayette called Grow Local, and they have different types of community gardens, but one of them is called sharing gardens, where anybody in the community can pick produce as they walk by, as long as people can volunteer also and help do the weeding. So I did a project through surveys and through focus groups to talk about how Grow Local Gardens as community development projects are helping community well-being. My research mentor for that program is named Lindsay Payne. She's through the Community Engagement Office at Purdue and also is part of the Grow Local group. She's one of the garden managers for a sharing garden. So more and more, it doesn't seem like it's such a coincidence to talk about community development and find gardening or agriculture involved as well. So I'm very interested in continuing learning what that's like. I'm still in the process of transcribing the focus groups, and I did finish some survey data as well. And I'll probably be talking about this at the ISQOLS conference. So I'm the student who's going to go to Hong Kong in just a few weeks and get to network there and have a wonderful experience. So I'm very excited for that. And that, I think, I'm checking my notes quickly. Yeah, that more or less sums it up. Thank you.
Chelsea's being modest. Tell them about the award you just won.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh, okay. So I actually met Dean Phillips through applying for the Rhodes Scholarship, which I did not get. But I did get the Fulbright English Teaching Scholarship, so I moved to Vietnam at the end of July to teach English for a year. So I'm very, very excited, and we'll try to integrate plants and agriculture. That you may be able to see a few of the house plants around me already. So I'll need to find some plants there and hopefully integrate a lot of food into English teaching. But I still need to learn how to teach English, but that will happen as well. So it's exciting.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. Well, that concludes our webinar. Thank you everyone for stopping.
Did Jonathan want to chime in?
Oh, is Jonathan yet? Yeah, sorry. Jonathan.
Yes, Jonathan's here.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Jonathan Wier. I'm Rhonda's graduate assistant student. And so I'm second year master's student in agriculture economics here at Purdue University. And my research is related to the intersections between public policy, local agriculture, and quality of life. And so during my tenure at Purdue, I've assisted Rhonda with a few studies involving local community efforts and how they pretty much either respond to either community development indicators, quality of life indicators. My personal research, I have done a website building exercise involving food insecurity in the greater Lafayette, West Lafayette area between agriculture education and the local food finders. Food bank here at Purdue, and just disseminating nutritional education to lower income communities in the area. And I'm also going with Rhonda to the CDS conference in Detroit to just share the cross information between International Society of Quality Life and CDS at the conference. So I'm really excited to be here and to be participating in this focus group.
And Jonathan's being too modest too. He also got another proposal accepted that he'll be co-presenting around some community well-being and health aspects at CDS too. So we're excited to head to Detroit in July and see what all we can do with bringing together those two areas. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Unless anyone else has anything else to add, that concludes our webinar.
Sorry, Jill.
Go ahead.
we often go over on our webinars, so we're in good company and going over. So what I'd like to do to end this is to ask each of you, so that's Rhonda, Craig, Kai, Jill, Jonathan, and Chelsea, to ask each of you to speak to a question that was asked at the beginning, and thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm going to mangle your name, so apologize to Majid for asking this question. But would you please, each of you, answer this question of what is the difference, is there a difference? What is the difference between well-being and quality of life? And then I will add in there, and happiness. So Craig, you want to go ahead and start with an answer, and then we'll go to Kai, and then we'll go to Rhonda, and then we'll go to Jill, and then we'll go to Jonathan, and then we'll end with you, Chelsea.
Sounds good. If you come to the ISQOLS conference, I'm sure you can see a lot of people who are going to be having a lively debate about that exact question. But from coming from a community development, nonprofit management background, what I see is the difference is that quality of life is, if you see it from a social indicator approach, you're really seeing it as a response to other economic indicators. This is an alternative way. This is a great way, and it's very traditional at looking at quality of life indicators. And so I think what I've seen, at least in the literature and community development, is those who are looking at well-being are trying not to take a reductionist approach to indicators, which indicators are great, but they're trying to expand theory. They're trying to have more inclusiveness regarding quality of qualitative work as well. And so there's sort of an expansion beyond just health. A lot of times people think quality of life is just health, and that's sort of one of the trajectories that we've seen. Regarding happiness, that's a whole different game. Coming from an organizational psychology background, there were lively debates between what is happiness and satisfaction, and how the brain makes decisions regarding those questions. But happiness is something that is definitely a part of overall well-being, and it's very, very important. So I don't have a good description on that one that I feel qualified to give, but I think it's great research that needs to continue to happen. And who knows, maybe someone will start the Community Happiness Initiative. So enjoy that.
So Kai, we'll hand it over to you to hear your the way that you see the differences, or not non-differences, between happiness, well-being, and quality of life.
Thank you. Yeah, so I see it in a 3-tier model. So it's, in the end, you have quality of life, which is kind of, I think, kind of the highest level tier. So where it's a bit more abstract. So, but you're more talking about really indicators, as Craig also said. And I think that's a good touching point, especially for politicians, community developers, and so on, to really focus on indicators and try to see how they are changing. When you talk about well-being, so it's still a bit more abstract than talking about subjective well-being or happiness. So when you talk about well-being, like, you also include more the objective well-being when you compare it to subjective well-being, so which are a lot of like health indicators, right? So like mental as well as physical health indicators. And so when you talk about subjective well-being, so the OECD usually describes 3 different constructs. So it's happiness, defined more in terms of a good affective balance, so more positive than negative emotions. Then you have life satisfaction, being like happy with or satisfied with different life indicators, and like your job, family, and so on, as well as in general with your life. And then you talk about eudaimonia, so which is important to in the construct from Aristotle, so where it's just to feel that you're using your potential and that you've lived like a good life, a meaningful life. And so seeing this in this 3 tiers, like quality of life, touching point more for politicians, well-being, touching point for like medical people, as well as psychologists, and so on. And then like more the subjective well-being, which is kind of, and happiness, which is a touching point still like for all of them, because probably it's the best global indicator, like to really see if all the change in other indicators really has a global impact. And that's kind of the beauty of measuring subjective well-being or happiness, because it is such a global indicator. And so just like putting all of this together. And I think that's hopefully answering that question. So like just how you can kind of define and also still combine these constructs.
Beautiful, beautifully said, Kai. Thank you. So Rhonda, now we're turning it to you. We're looking at the definitions of happiness, well-being, quality of life, or you want to mention, I'm sorry, I should have said to you, quality of life, well-being, and happiness. So I would like to hear what you have to say on the differences and the similarities.
Sure, I'll try to keep it a little short. I've got quite a bit to share with you if you like, but this is coming from the Handbook of Community Wellbeing, which we also talked about community development in. But there's sort of a formal definition that we've been using in some of our work. It's not necessarily one that everyone uses, but I'll give this to you, and it's pretty long. Apologies in advance. So community well-being then includes sort of a comprehensive and integrated concepts developed by research constructs related to residents' perceptions of the community, residents' needs fulfillment, observable community conditions, and the social and cultural context of the community. So community well-being then is really, it's a sort of a multi-dimensional context, but it's about values and it's more about the ideas around economic, social, environmental, cultural that impact people. And so also within that, there's these sort of what we call related conceptions, as Kai and both Craig mentioned: happiness, quality of life, and community development. They're sometimes used interchangeably, but there are differences between all of these things. And when, for example, if we just lump together everyone's happiness measures and say that's community well-being, well, it may or may not be, because it may only be reflecting subjective and not enough objective or other dimensions of a community. Because as we know, in community development, it's a very sort of complex set of conditions of how people are experiencing those conditions in the built, environmental, and economic, cultural, social dimensions of communities of place. So if we go back to well-being for just a moment, then we see that we have related conceptions, but yet happiness is often, as part of that, is often thought as individual state of being. And where we really need more research and work is getting to what Craig, or maybe it was Kai, said earlier, community happiness, where what elements are needed to really gauge that happiness and well-being of the collective, of the community. And that's the area that really is pushing forward this whole idea of taking community well-being to the next level, of making it an area of study, to have it both for research and practice. And so that's why we are pushing so hard on this. That this is an area that we need to figure out. And it can't just be that we just take what we know from community development and call it community well-being, because it is more than that. It's about a values sort of construct. Now, community development is a different thing. It's both a practice and a discipline, and it focuses on improvement of people's conditions, usually in a community of place. So the built environment and all the things that come with that: social, economic, environmental, political, cultural. It's about social capacity building, which is different than community well-being, because we don't hear a lot about we're going to try to build social capacity in community well-being studies. What we're looking at is does it exist, but we may not be integrating that process of making that happen. And it's often a part of public policy, community development, whereas community well-being may or may not be. It may be someone just gauging what they think that community, how happy it is, but it's got may or may not have influence on policy. So the difference then, and here's all of that condensed, the difference between community well-being and community development is that the latter, community development, seeks to take action in the public, social, private sectors to achieve desirable goals. You may or may not get that with community well-being. You may have an individual community saying we're going to improve it, but they're probably going to have to use community development constructs to get some improvement. So there's a difference almost between the idea of the construct of community well-being and the action of community development. I hope that helps or not confuse people even more.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Jill, do you want to speak to how you were seeing the differences and similarities between quality of life, well-being, and happiness?
Well, I won't attempt to unpack all of that in this short webinar, but I think the three previous speakers did a great job of explaining their perspectives. And I will just use this as an opportunity to plug our organizations and say, if that question intrigues you, and if you want to learn more, I encourage you to be That means that you will be receiving journals from both individual organizations and have opportunities to come to our conferences and engage with practitioners who really have spent years and years and years trying to understand those concepts. And just on that note, we will be working on a joint membership opportunity for both CDS and ISQOLS members so that you can pay one fee and have access to both organizations, and that should be coming soon, hopefully. So that's all I'll say. I'll let everyone else discuss. So if you said you wanted to ask the students if they're still with us.
Yep. Yeah, I think it would be really nice to hear from the students. Jonathan, are you still there? I'm not seeing your video. If you're still there, it'd be really nice to hear from you how your experience of quality of life, well-being, and happiness. No? How about Chelsea? Are you still there? Maybe
Hello, Chelsea's here. Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
Great. So I've thought about the difference between well-being, quality of life, and happiness I've thought of it as more an individual well-being, so more subjective, and that quality of life is more encompassing the objective and subjective, thinking of like quality of life of a community. But of course, also there's individual quality of life. I'll be exploring this question more definitely at the conference. I used the Ruth Veenhoven's 4 life ordering constructs for the good life. I forget the full title, but it has subjective and objective, and it's more geared towards individual well-being. But I kind of tried to apply that also to look at my survey results and also decoding my research transcripts with the focus groups within those different sort of 4 categories, 3 of which were subjective and 1 was very objective. And within that objective kind of then had the interaction of like an individual contributing to community well-being. So in general, I've been sort of saying one's more individual, one's more community. And then I think of happiness within a place or within an individual's sort of like psyche, having the opportunity and ability for sort of like sparks of creativity or good highlights, because if you're happy all the time, that kind of just becomes your neutral flat line. And I think of happiness more as sort of like a spark of positive feeling. And I think that is definitely a part of being well and having a good community, is that there's that opportunity to have happiness, however an individual gets that. So that's how I've been thinking about it so far. Thanks.
Beautiful, thank you. Jonathan, do you want some last words? You were on there and now you're, we saw you and then we didn't see you. All right. Well, this has been, thank you so much, all of you who have stayed on and given answers to this question. I think that we could do a few webinars on this question. It'd be really interesting to gather data.
Do we have any questions from anyone I think we still have 17 people still with us. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to use that chat bar down at the bottom, or you can even unmute yourself and we will listen in.
I have just a quick announcement, which is there's a brand new journal called the International Journal of Community Wellbeing. Some of you are on the editorial board that were in the chat room today. And this will be launched by Springer this year. And so that will be a new platform for pushing forward this idea of community well-being. So just wanted to go ahead and mention that. It's being edited editors from a team at Seoul National University in South Korea, and myself. So we're getting ready to launch it. Kai is on the editorial board. I think Craig, maybe. I think yeah, there's several of you on the editorial board. So I'll rope more of you in if you're interested. So just let me know.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
This is Rick at ASU. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Rick.
The only thing I want to say is a comment. Thanks to all of you. A lot of times important work is done and you never receive praise or acknowledgement. So this was a fabulous webinar. It makes me very excited about both organizations, and I'm thinking of ways to weave in. So congratulations. Fabulous job.
Thank you so much.
That's so nice.
Any other comments, questions?
We've recorded this, and so we'll be putting this up online. Somebody asked in the chat. You can always find the recordings on the ISQOLS YouTube channel, and if you can't get there, go to ISQOLS, go to the tab resource that says the tab that says resources, and then go to the very bottom one, and you'll find the recordings for past webinars and also the upcoming webinars. So we have a couple of webinars coming up. We have John DeGraff has been doing a project on beauty, and he'll be giving a webinar in July. And then we are scheduling another one, I think, with Mark Anielski, who just wrote a book on community well-being, and perhaps with John Hall at the United Nations, who's been working on a document to inform policymakers of how to use this kind of data. If you would like to do a webinar, or you know somebody who you think would be a good subject for a webinar, and this is particularly to those of you who are going to these conferences, please let them know about these webinars and send them to Jill and myself. And thus far, we've only said no to one person. So we're very open and would really want to contribute in the way that we can through these webinars. Thank you so much, Rhonda and Craig and Kai and Jill and Chelsea and Jonathan for this webinar. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. We'll be sending just a follow-up email once this is uploaded with some details and links to all the things that were mentioned. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.